All right. Greetings, greetings, greetings to everyone. I am your host, Jamal Brown, and you are in for a treat here on the Just to Freedom radio show. I normally don't put on what I like to call my educator, got my elbow patches and everything. I feel like a scholar when I have this particular jacket on. I'm amongst some scholars and educators, so I had to bring my A game. I'm going to ask you all just in a brief second, but by my estimation, we have about a century's worth of Black education professionals, in our midst. I'll let somebody do the math real fast. But again, I think we have about 100 years worth of education on the line with us. We have some esteemed guests, and we will be discussing today, how do we protect our Black sons and daughters when we send them off to school? Again, let's just go ahead and get right into this. Again, I'm your host, Jamal Brown, AKA Mr. Black 365, and I would like to have our panelists introduce themselves. The official doctor. We have a doctor, almost doctor, and we have an official doctor in our midst. Dr. Aresa Allen-Rochester, please introduce yourself. Tell us again a little bit about your educational background and your current occupation.
Okay, wonderful. Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Allen-Rochester. I am the proud principal of Los Angeles Unified School District's LaSalle Avenue Spanish Dual Language Elementary School. I have been a principal now for about 12, this is my 12th or 13th year, I can't remember, of being a principal, both in elementary and early ed. And this is my second elementary school that I have been able to lead and transform. My educational background, I am a proud graduate of San Diego State, those mighty, mighty Aztecs, let's go Aztecs. And I am a graduate of Cal State, Dominguez Hills. And I also hold my doctorate degree is from Azusa Pacific. I was an elementary teacher for 11 years before stepping my feet into the realm of administrator. And I actually did everything kind of backwards. I was never an assistant principal. I was never a Title I coordinator, and none of those things. I literally went from classroom teacher to district level administrator, in which I was responsible for designing curriculum for that's best practices for African American and standard English learners across the board, and for parents as well. I have also been a university professor at USC, and so that's me. I also am a partner with UC, my partner here, Nadine Luke, and we are educational consultants as well. And I'm also independent motivational speaker. I'm just talking so much, I feel, and with my focus on culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy and practice from a leadership strand.
When you have so much depth, it's hard to figure out where to cut it. No, that's quite okay. That's quite okay. We appreciate that. One thing that I learned about you just now is the fact that you went from the classroom straight to admin side of things. We'll be sure to touch on that a little bit later on in the discussion. Partner in crime, Miss Nadine Luke, please tell us a little bit about yourself, educational background, and your current roles and responsibilities in life as far as your profession goes.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm Nadine Luke, and I have been in education, I'm almost ashamed to say, it's telling my age, for over 25 years. And I have taught at the university level, as well as I'm still an elementary school teacher. I've done administration as an assistant principal, love the classroom, love just imparting that knowledge into children and working with the families. I, like Dr. Rochester said, I am her partner in crime, in promoting our children and just education with our consulting business, solution-based consulting. I am also a published author, inspirational speaker, and so many other things, because we know that we can all be multiple things like Imhotep. So I'm going to stop right there, but just understand that I am all about education in every aspect. And
Okay, well,
thank you for having me here tonight.
Certainly, it's our pleasure. If you can go just a tad bit longer, behind you in that beautiful background, I'm seeing, again, NJ Luke Publishing. I see consulting. Touch on those things a little bit more for us here in this intro. Okay,
certainly. One of the things that I always dreamt of doing was to be an author. And I decided that, you know, looking at all of the books in the classroom, we just didn't have enough books that showed children that looked like me, children of color, that they were more than just a sassy person in a book, but that they had some depth and concept. We didn't have that available. So I decided that I wanted to write books that help children to understand that greatness lies within them and that they could be anything they want to be, and just to change that whole perspective on how other children see Black children and how Black children see themselves. So there came the birth of NJ Luke Publishing. And my first book was The Veterinarian Fashion Designer, a young girl with the desire and aspirations to be a fashion designer, yet a veterinarian. And I have a host of books in that series, The Gymnast, The Musician, that are coming like real soon, like within the next week. And also something that was really heavy on my heart was racism and bullying in the school system or amongst the children. And my son experienced that, and there came the birth of They Call Me Africa. And it's his journey of how he solved the problem of being targeted and bullied in a school based on his race and his differences.
I love it. I love it.
I hope I didn't take too much time.
No, you're just fine. You're just fine. Now let's go to your other partner. I affectionately call him Dr. Luke. He will soon be officially Dr. Luke, you know, as far as the paperwork goes. Again, brother, tell us a little bit more about that journey. Again, your educational background and your current occupation.
All right. Well, I'll just let you know it's kind of hard to follow these ladies. I kind of want to be quiet and just ride on their coattails. They're doing so much. I mean, it's pretty amazing to know both of them and know the great work that they're doing in our communities and for our children. So I applaud you, ladies, even before I start talking about me. But I just like everyone to know that I am an educator that's been doing this for about 23 years. I actually started, this is my second career. I started as a counselor and therapist, and I was doing family preservation, doing an African-centered therapeutic model called Into Psychotherapy. I did that for about 5 years in Washington, D.C., Baltimore area. And I always wanted to teach, and I always wanted to be in education. And I saw the opportunity to transition back then when I know there was a program that was changing, and said, this will be my opportunity to get into education. So around the time, shortly after my wife and I got married, she was already a teacher. She was already an accomplished teacher in elementary school, but she also taught on the college level. And I said, well, that's something I've always wanted to do too. So I went on and got in a teacher education program and a master's program at the same time. Didn't know I was going to be allowed to get in on a emergency credential. And so I had my first class and was taking classes to be an educator. So I was learning on the fly, if you will. So every educator knows they always have that first year, and you never forget it. It's a memorable time. So I have some memories, some that I learned a lot, and some that I made sure that I went through and built up my pedigree, if you will, from that first year, and said, okay, I'm not going to do that again. So I learned a lot on that first year. And then I went forward, completed the master's degree program. But I also want to say, too, I believe in HBCUs, so I'm a proud HBCU grad. Psychology degree from Howard University, HU, you know. And I received my master's degree from McDaniel College in curriculum design and administration. And came out here and started working with the Palmdale School District and taught for 10 years in the classroom, went into into administration. I've been an administrator for, I think this is my 14th year as an administrator. Site administration, assistant principal, was a principal for 8 years. And now I'm a director of access and equity for African American student achievement in the Palmdale School District, and working to make sure that we focus in on our most vulnerable student populations. My title being a director of access and equity for African American student achievement gives me the opportunity to focus in on something that's my passion. And my passion is students of African descent or people of African descent. People that know me know that's my hobby, to study African history, also study African history as it is related to Eurocentric or Western civilization. So I do lectures on those types of topics, talk a lot about African history. But in my position, in my career, I focus in on African American students and their achievement. And my focus is about affirming them, making sure they are affirmed. Also, making sure that we understand that what they bring to the classroom is brilliance. And our students bring some brilliant things. And what I'd like to do is make sure that our teachers, we help build their capacity to understand that and to really recognize that to the point where as they affirm their students in the classroom, they know what's walking into their classroom. What's walking into the classroom are brilliant minds, and they have the ability to shape and mold them. So I'm very passionate about that. I make sure that people understand that, hear that, and I try to make sure that we support people. It's a lot of information out there against African American students and specifically, and people in general. So I dissuade those myths. That's what I do. I'm a myth buster. Hello?
Oh, you muted yourself.
I muted myself.
Right.
Perfect segue, actually, to my first question. It was actually my second question, but you all are too much of heavy hitters for me to give you any softball questions. So we're just about to hop right into this thing. We know that our children are brilliant. We know that once, the data suggests that once they enter school, whether it be first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, maybe even fifth grade, that the light that they have, that natural light, begins to dim. Why? Some say racism of teachers. Some say institutional racism. Some say lowered expectations from teachers. Our esteemed panelists, but Dr. Luke, if you can get us started, what is the reason for the dimming of that light that we tend to see time after time in our children once they enter school?
Well, one thing I'd say it's a combination of all of those that you mentioned. Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu had a whole series in the 80s and up to I think his last book on it was in 1990, The Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys. And he talks about how in the field of education, by the time our Black students reach fourth grade, that light, as you termed it, is dimmed, and it's because of systemic issues. It's because of very direct and indirect issues with what's happening in the classroom. There are societal issues. So there are a lot of things that work against our Black students in the school system. The other part of it is that when they get into the classroom, they don't see themselves. They don't. They come into what some may call a hostile environment at times.
They don't see themselves in the walls. They don't see themselves represented by the teachers. They don't see themselves represented by the personnel in the school. How are they not seeing themselves?
They don't see
in the curriculum.
anywhere. They don't
Yeah,
see themselves.
go ahead, Doc.
And
I know she's full of it. She not full of it. She's loaded with stuff. So go ahead,
Gotcha.
Dr.
Please,
Allen-Rochester.
you know, part of the major issue is that, yes, the systemic racism, but it's getting people to understand that our kids have to see themselves throughout the entire day. It's not just like, oh, you're in the classroom and I put up a picture of Mary McLeod Bethune. You know what I'm saying? Or now I just introduced this book and it has a Black face on it. So one of my prime examples for that would be A Snowy Day. Like, A Snowy Day is not a culturally relevant book. However, that literature, again, not culturally relevant, but many people use that as an example because it's easy to introduce a book that is of low substance but got a Black face on it. So if you take away the character of Snowy Day, it's a little Black boy, and you replace it with anybody, any ethnic group besides a Black child, it does not change anything about
fits.
the book.
It works.
It's nothing. And so it has no relevance to who we are as African people. And so one of the things that's important is that as we're introducing literature, that we're introducing culturally relevant and responsive literature where kids authentically see representations of themselves, that teachers are provided with targeted, ongoing, comprehensive professional development. And I mean targeted, and I don't mean like, because we have this, and I'm saying we, kind of in general, because I'm not really one of the we's. But in general, when we're talking about we, the educational system, teachers are allowed to present surface level instruction. Teachers are not always given pushback because the focus normally falls on what's best for teachers versus what's best for children. And so what takes place in that kind of environment is that it becomes okay to give our babies mediocrity. It's okay to never have our children see authentic representations of themselves. And the other piece is that some of our own teachers, and I'm talking about Black teachers, who don't even believe that this is worthy work, who don't have the skill set because they don't know themselves either. And so one of the things that I do in my school site, we begin every single year with a whole knowledge of self unit. That's how we start. So we spend the first 2 months, that's all we talk about, building our capacity.
It's for the students or the staff or both?
Oh, it's everybody.
Okay.
So we start with literally building from knowledge of self. You can't teach children what they need to know when you don't know it. If you can't teach them about the greatness of mathematics and that mathematics comes from us. So you can't say I'm not a mathematician because Imhotep tells us differently. The parents that still stand today tell us differently, and that the mystery schools was not a mystery to us, it was a mystery to them. So we can't. But if you don't know this stuff, if you don't know that Pythagorean was not a mathematician, that he was not a scientist, that he was a thief, and that when we talk about the Pythagorean theorem, we're teaching children about a thief. If you don't know that, how can you teach children that? And so this year, I spent a lot of time in consultation with Dr. Chika Akua, and I bring in those type of people in addition to my staff that I handpick who will work for me and in regards to my administrative team, so that our kids will get an authentic representation of culturally relevance and not this surface level, because most schools, their introduction of culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy and practice is a surface level introduction, which leads more to multiculturalism and not social justice and not authentic representations of themselves. So it's all of those things, but that's how you change that.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
And Jamal, if I could kind of tag on to that, one of the things that I feel is really important is for not just the teachers, but administrators as well, to make sure that they are learning about the different perspectives in history. One of the things that we see when we open those social studies books is that everything is taught from one perspective. So if everyone is imparted with that knowledge, like Dr. Rochester was saying, if everyone is imparted with that knowledge, they understand that we need to get the children to see, well, who else was present during this time? And what other voices should we be hearing during this time, during this lesson? What other voices need to be heard? So really digging into that perspective, giving different perspectives, because just just teaching about Martin Luther King, that is not enough. And I'm tying my tongue up right here because I'm just like, I'm so full. I have so much I want to say about this, because that's the part that really gets me. When we are teaching colonialism, we're not teaching that, and again, we're saying collective because that's not how I teach. We're not teaching that there were others who were there that were not enslaved at that time, that were very instrumental in a lot of the things that took place. We don't teach that other part of history. We don't teach what our children need to see, meaning that they need to understand that they were not just slaves that were in there, but they actually had something of value that they presented during those times. So, for example, in our classroom, I asked the question, so if Columbus came to the United States, if he came to the New World, which we all know he didn't come here, so that's another lie that's being taught in schools. If we're being taught that he came, who else was here? And how did they feel about him coming here? And it wasn't just Native Americans that were here. There were Africans, because they had traveled to the different continents long before Europe even thought about it. So they were here as well. So what were the perspectives of those who were there? So really digging deep and getting the children to actually do that research, and for the teachers to facilitate that learning so that they could see that history is being told by the losers of the people who didn't really win anything. They are telling the story and allowing the children to dig deep to find out, what is that other story that's being taught? That should be taught, excuse me. What is the other perspective to that? And pulling that into the classrooms, so that way we have a full view, a full picture of exactly what happened. And just one more thing I wanted to hit on, that the cultural pedagogy, the cultural responsive pedagogy, it's dealing with social, emotional, it's dealing with political, it's dealing with every single aspect of life. Our children have to understand and see themselves in everything that has been done in this world. When they see that, then they feel better about themselves, and not only them just seeing it, but other people need to see, because that's where our problems are. Other people don't recognize the greatness in Black people because of what they've been taught in the history books. So we have to change the total perspective that everyone has, including the Black child, including those children that are sitting in the classroom with them.
And Jamal, I want to say this. I know you're about to get to a different question, but it like really hit my head. Okay, so I think if we look at the administrator, and I think that really needs to be like a focus of our discussion, because we constantly have conversations about what does culturally relevant look like. And I really want to say that, I mean, that, like, we know what it looks like. We know when it's not real. We know when it's not authentic. We know when it is. But I think we need to start having conversations about what is the role and responsibility of the administrator, because you have to guide this work. And, you know, and I'll just speak for my district in particular. My school is one of 16 schools that Dr. Joyce McKenna has established a separate network, and we're called the HEAT Network. And our focus is on looking at changing historically low outcomes for African American children. So I say this to say that even with this network being in place, the conversation still falls short on how are we preparing our administrators to be effectively able to do this work. And, and I think the only way that any of this can really take place, because we have silos, right? We have the pockets of teachers who get it. We got the pockets of students who are being exposed to this. But if the person in charge, who is the bearer of the keys, if you aren't actually skilled in this area and you don't know how to do this work, it's always going to fall short to just a couple of teachers or just a couple of classrooms that get this exposure. And so we really need to begin to have this conversation about how do you transform a school? What is transformational social justice? What is transformational culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy and practice? And that transformation comes with the leader. And so really looking at providing supports for administrators who have the desire and the will to actually do this work. Dr. Asa Hilliard tells us, he told us years ago that, do you have the will to do the work? Right. And so that's what we need to look at. Who has the will? Because we can train you. At my district, I have been responsible for training my fellow colleagues, fellow administrators in this work. Because this is really my passion. This is really my thing. And I can tell you, just speaking very honestly, and like I said, this is a core group of 16 schools that have a high population of Black kids. And most of them don't want to do this work. Most of the people who's leading these schools do not have the desire to do this work. And some who do have the desire to do the work don't have the skill set, and they're fearful to say, I need support, I need help, walk me through what I need to do, because we're waiting on a book, right? Even as a teacher, I don't understand teachers who use teachers guides. I think that's crazy. So you're waiting on somebody to give you a manual to tell you, how do I teach Black children? And it's not no actual manual. Like, you have, some of that is just, it's innately in you. And you have to begin the process of learning, yes, culture, yes, relationship building, yes, the changing of a brand, yes, building collaborative systems in place. But you have to start with yourself. And I think that is where the pushback comes, because it's a lot of work that you have to do to be effective in doing this. And that's where we fall short.
Definitely. Let me pause real quick for station identification. You're listening to the Gist of Freedom radio show. We have over 500 shows that have been listened to over 30,000 times. That's right, over 30,000 times these shows have been listened to. You can find out more at blackhistoryuniversity.com, blackhistoryuniversity.com. Again, the show is Gist of Freedom radio show. I'm your host, Jamal Brown, AKA Mr. Black 365. And again, it's a pleasure and honor to be here with these educators. I want to turn the conversation slightly in a different direction, still the same direction, but again, we're talking about how to protect our children, how to grow our children, how to intensify the light in our children, and definitely make sure that the light is not dimmed. One place where I see the light being dimmed is in the area of punishment, in the area of suspensions, expulsions, and what have you. A concept that has been introduced to some as of recent, but it's not really a new concept, is the concept of restorative justice. If our esteemed panelists could first define or provide some examples of what restorative justice is, what it looks like, and do you all feel as if it is an effective means of dealing with problems that arise at the school that are harming our children academically by taking them out of the classroom? Again, any of you all can feel free to, again, define first, please, for us, what restorative justice is, what it looks like, and how you feel it could or should be used.
I'm gonna let Dr. Allen-Rochester handle that because I know that's her wheelhouse. I know Nadine, I know Mrs. Luke has something, and I'll pick up the crumbs.
Okay. So
we all have a lot on it.
I already know.
Justice, it has a historical connection to the prison system. And so it was used as a rehabilitation, program for those who were in prison. And so what it looks like on a school site is that, and this is also another myth, because many people think that what it means is we just don't suspend, and you just talk to the kids.
Right. You want to keep your suspension numbers down, so you just give them a slap on the wrist and tell them to say, "I'm sorry." That's what I was told.
Think. Many people think that, but that's not how it's done effectively. And so literally it is revamping your entire system from a counseling base, right? So it's providing avenues for the kids that when they are, I'm just going to say, in trouble, that they know that trouble is relative to the time and the situation, so that you're always being taught how to self-monitor, how to self-regulate behaviors. There are systems in place where if you have, for example, kids who, let's say 5 kids who have been having problems with getting along with each other, that you have community circle inside your classroom to deal with those kind of issues and concerns. You have separate community circles, that's whole school, where for my school, for example, we call it our reflection room, so that I have a full-time psychiatric social worker who actually, and my school psychologist, who actually runs our restorative justice reflection room, in which if you are a child who you feel like you're having problems with making friends, they pull a group of kids together that they call the friends group, where they're working on giving you strategies and supports in that area. If you are a child who's having problems with, let's say, behavior management, that they give you strategies and supports with that. But
So
all
these are kids talking to kids.
Kids talking to kids, guided by the adult who serves as the facilitator. And so it becomes a community. And then starting from this notion that we're all here together to change behavior. Now, does it mean that there are times where that this doesn't work? Because we all know this is not 100% of anything. Mm-hmm. And that there are times that, restoring the harm cannot happen. There are times where it has gone to the point where suspension is your only resort, but that's your last resort, because we do understand that suspension, the data tells us that it doesn't change or correct behavior. However, some things become out of our hands. Like if you bring a gun to school, we could talk about restorative justice forever.
You got to get away from here.
You bring a gun,
you got to go.
So we're talking about behaviors that you literally allowing the avenue for children to be able to self-reflect, monitor, and understand that as we're correcting behavior, that we're providing resources in every aspect of the school. So it becomes the language of the school. That
if you could real quick, let me hop in. Paint the picture for what this reflection room looks like. So again, you're telling me that there's kids talking to a kid. There's a professional in the room. And so again, is that professional sitting at the front of the class with a PowerPoint clicking, hey, this is how you behave? Again, paint the picture for those who may not know what happens inside of the reflection room.
Okay, so in the reflection room, right? So let's say it's recess time. So during recess time, the reflection room is used as a separate fun room for kids who don't want to be on the playground, or they're feeling a little apprehensive about being on the playground. So during recess time, it's a place where there's puzzles, there's a library, there's an art section, things like that. And then my psychiatric social worker who runs this room, she also provides like yoga with the kids during a couple of times a week. This is when we were actually on the campus, a couple of times a week as well. So that's during recess time. Now, when we're not in recess, what that reflection room looks like, it then turns into like a counseling center, so that the kids come in and they have a circle that they create, and like you bring something that's near and dear to you. So maybe you're bringing, a blanket that brings you comfort. So you put that in the circle, and that becomes like your talking piece. And it's literally you're actually taking time. It takes about a good 6 weeks of prepping to get the kids to actually be able to run this by themselves, because the teacher or the psychiatric social worker, whoever you have running this, but for us in the classroom, the teachers do this once a week in the classroom. But for the psychiatric social worker, she makes this available every day, that she's literally modeling this behavior as a member of the circle so that the kids can eventually self-regulate and monitor their behavior themselves.
And just to tag on there, as a teacher in the classroom, this is something that I do in my classroom all the time. We go through a training process, and I'm teaching them how to problem solve. I'm teaching them about conflict resolution. I teach them how to do their affirmations and how to create affirmations. I teach them how to meditate, because those are some of the tools that they're going to need as they move into the independent stages. So in our classroom, our community circle is also called our peace place. So if there's a conflict, initially, just like was previously stated, initially, I'm there in the midst of that community circle, but I'm guiding them. After a while, the children, and I promise you, the children, they end up calling for it themselves. You see them creating community circles outside on the playground because somebody had a conflict and they're saying, you know what, we need to talk about this. This is how I'm feeling. This is the way this made me feel. And they're solving their own problems. And it's really been effective because we know, first of all, that if children are not inside of the classroom, they're not learning. And sending them home to go play on their video games is not in their best interest, because when they come back, they become they become angry because they don't know what's going on. So with the teachers, we are the first responders to situations that happen. So I really feel that first part of the restorative justice, as far as the classroom, before they even have to go to administration, is to resolve that inside the classroom. Let children know that this is not the end of the world. You made a mistake, talk about it, resolve it, and move on. So once they get that inside of them and understand, you see them begin to self-correct, because now they feel that they're of value. You've imparted in them that they have control over their situation. You've helped them to understand that they are the person that makes the final decision. And so they tend to start making better decisions. Are there some outliers that, will try and buck the system? Of course, there's always going to be the outliers, even inside the classroom. But one of the experiences that I had with the outliers, the students will come together and I don't have to say anything. They will run it and they will address that situation and try their best to help that person. So when we first come into the classroom, we're all in a circle and everyone has an opportunity to share, because you have to build that trust, you have to build that relationship. And so by the time they get to the end of the school year, they're a family and they're protective of one another, they're supportive, they're tutoring one another. So it doesn't just touch the behavior aspect, it touches their academics, because they understand that they have a complete support system there and there's trust there. So restorative justice is really important, because so many of our Black children are immediately kicked out of their classrooms. I can't even tell you over the years of my teaching how many children, and I call them, I rescue them, how many children I've had to rescue that were sitting in the hallway crying, or sitting outside on the ramp crying because they got kicked out of their classroom. So I would bring them into my classroom and have a conversation with them. And so we can't kick our kids out of the classroom.
And they wouldn't if they worked with me.
All we're talking about here.
Well,
At the top.
I told you I was going to pick up the crumbs. So, So when we look at restorative justice, so I just love how we do things, because we have a system, we have certain things in place, we have a way of doing things, and some of those things, when we talk systemically, are built to for our demise. But I love the remix. I love the adjustments that get made on certain things that are systemic. And Black people have this resilience, if you will, of making things work in a situation where they usually would not. What I'm going to with this is that when we look at our system, when we look at the educational system, when we look at what it was built for, when we look at the notion of bells and sitting in rows and things like that, it was built for the factory workers. And then it was also built, it had a parallel meaning where it was built also for prisons, for people to function, because it gave you certain times to do this and certain times to do that. You were driven by a bell. So you heard what Dr. Allen-Rochester mentioned as far as the foundation of where restorative justice practices kind of come from. It came out of the prison system. So when you think about that, just think about how the remix happened with the restorative justice practices, because they're not trying to rehabilitate prisoners. They've never tried to rehabilitate prisoners, but then they have certain things inside the prison system that they say that they try to give them certain supports and help them and counsel them and things like that. And then they pull that tool or strategy out and they bring it into the schools. So there's that's grits for a whole nother meal. We can talk about that at another time. But when you think about that, think about how that was pulled out of the prison system to bring to our students in schools and public education. There's something about that. And we can go into the whole new Jim Crow that Michelle Alexander talks about and break that down too. But I know time is limited. We don't have time to do that. But I want you to think about the remix, because when you look at restorative justice practices, we did an African thing. We started pulling in some of those tools, some of those skills, some of those behaviors, some of that worldview, if you will, of what is it that gets inside the person and helps the person better who they are, and not just the person that the interpersonal, but the intrapersonal. I mean, the intrapersonal versus the interpersonal. So then the students help each other, and they use the circle, because the circle is so very important. So when you have that circle motif, then nobody's back is to you. You see everybody, and then that circle supports, right? So that whole remix of taking that something out of the prison that was brought into the public school system, but that remix of it to use as this very, very useful tool, everybody can learn something from it. So that's the part that I wanted to make sure that was real clear, because these ladies here are experts in it, but I want to make sure that I let you know that I look at the global view, if you will, and try to look at it from this holistic standpoint and kind of where things come from and a systemic pattern. So restorative justice practices are a good thing. I want to say that, but also there's a connection, and you have to always have to have your antenna up, your spidey sense going, because when things are brought to us to work with our students, to work with the population that has this disproportionality, if you will. You're talking about Black and Latino youth in schools, and they're most likely to have all these negative statistics, and they bring you something to help them, quote unquote, help them. Like it was said earlier that people are looking for a manual. No, you have to get in there and do the work, but not only get in there and do the work, but utilize the tools that you have, and make sure those tools have empathy inside of them, they have love inside of them, and they have accountability built inside of them. So when you think about restorative justice practices, they have all of that.
No doubt. I appreciate that. Again, I am your host, Mr. Jamal Brown, aka Mr. Black 365. You're listening to the Gist of Freedom Radio Show. You will find this show archived on black365.com, as well as blackhistoryuniversity.com as well. We have about 15 more minutes left in the show. I have a question that I'm dying to ask, and also want to close out by letting you all talk about what's next. what you're working on, what you want the public to know about that you have. Again, that's simmering. But before we get to that, again, the question I have, would love for each of you to answer. I wanted to hear your top 5, but in the interest of time, we'll do 2, maybe 3. Tips, tricks, nuggets, gems that you, in a perfect world, would like for parents to tell their children at the top of each year, before they go back to school, regardless of grade or as it progresses or what have you. Again, the things that you would love for parents to equip their children with before we send them back into the classrooms each and every year. Again, our theme here tonight was protecting our children while they go to school. So again, we talked about, some of the ills, some of the reasons, what sort of gets them derailed. Then we talked about restorative justice. Now, again, what's that sort of proactive piece, that nugget, that tip, that trick, that jewel, that gem that you wished parents would tell their children before they go back into the classrooms? Again, I'd love to hear from each of you. Let's start on my left, where my screen is set up, with Mrs. Luke, if you could get us started with that. Again, two or three nuggets that you wish parents would equip their children with.
Oh my goodness, you're limiting me to 2 or 3. Well, first of all, I think parents need to, first and foremost, remind their children that they're loved. That's very important. Secondly, remind them that greatness is inside of them. And it doesn't matter what anyone says or does, they can still succeed against all odds, and to believe in themselves. I think those are the things that I see in the classroom that they're lacking. They're lacking belief. They're lacking understanding that they're loved. They're lacking the fact that understanding that there's something deeper inside of them than just what somebody said they are. And I touch on that, especially in They Call Me Africa, building those affirmations so that way that they can stand in the midst of any type of adversity that they may face during their lives. So really affirming them, and especially in those 3 areas.
I love it. Thank you so much. Dr. Rochester?
I would definitely start by saying that it's important that parents instill in their children a desire to be a learner. Because oftentimes the thought is that to be inquisitive is seen as a negative. To be someone that is constantly on a quest to become greater is not always seen as a positive. And to be a learner, meaning that you're constantly evolving, you're constantly reading, you're constantly researching, you're constantly inquiring, that is a good thing.
That's right.
And those things are not attached to being European, that those things are attached to being African.
That's right. And
I think many of our parents have not embraced that themselves. And my prayer would be that definitely that would be one of the things that we start with, that tell your children, definitely it's okay to be a learner. Tell your children that mediocrity is not in our DNA. I tell my babies this every single day, like that literally you see like it's posted up around our school that Dr. Rochester says mediocrity is not in our DNA. We are not the ones who have ever been placed in a position of servitude on our own. They kidnapped us. But even in the midst of being kidnapped, we flipped that. As Gerald has said, we put the remix on things because greatness rests in us. It's in our DNA. And I think the other piece that's important to note that in the beginning of every year is to allow parents to know that it's a process, right? That we are here to work with you as a team, and that it's okay if your kids do not get something when they initially are exposed to it. Don't browbeat your kids and make them feel that they are less than because it's something that they're struggling with. That's part of life, but that we must have resilience, we must persevere, we must stay grounded, and that is how we all grow. So if I had to summarize it in just 3 or 4, I think I gave you 5 or 6. That's what I would say.
Told you they full, bro. I told you they full.
Full, right.
So I guess I would say, I bring it back to the old school, right? And I'm going somewhere with it. An old adage that we've gotten away from is that you're a child of the Most High, or some say you're a child of God, and put some clean underclothes on because you might get sick and have to go to the hospital, right? So now that's funny, but think about what that has inside of it, right? It has self-respect. It has reverence for something that's greater than you. It has reverence for that you're connected to everything that you encounter, right? So when we start thinking about that, we have to, what I want parents to teach them is that, but I want them to teach them the essence of that. Because one thing I would love for our parents to tell their children is that it all begins with Africa. Now, the reason I say it like that, and the reason I use that old adage, is because when you start thinking about self-respect, when you start thinking about reverence to a higher being, and when you start thinking about interconnectedness, those are all principles that come out of Africa. And when you start understanding who we are, we have to, because it was said earlier that some of the parents don't understand some of this and they have to learn it. But we have been taught that that's a wrong thing to teach. So if you pose this question and I answer it like that in front of thousands of people in an auditorium, people will look at me sideways. But really, that's true. It's factual. It all begins with Africa. But we're taught that it all begins with Europe, right? That's what we're taught. We're inside of a system that has Western civilization, which is what some would call white supremacy, Euro-centered mindset, and all of that, all of those pieces. But really, it all begins with Africa. Our children need to understand that. So when they come to the classroom, when they come to the schoolhouse, they have their heads held high because they know that they are African descended. A lot of times we get into this Black or African American, Negro, whatever it is. But when it gets down to it, even though there are some other names, but when you say you are connected to something, a place where it all began, that says something to a child right there. And we need to make sure we let our parents know that is what our children need to come to school. Because then when we go to what was talked about earlier with all of the teaching the administrators and teaching the teachers and helping them build the capacity to do what needs to be done, then they're not working from a deficit. They're working from a child that has some self-understanding, some self-respect. And they know that they're gonna have clean underwear on every time they come to school, right? Because they might get hurt and have to go to the hospital, right? So we have to make sure that we and I wanted to make sure everybody understand it's not rocket science. That's something kind of simplistic, but it's based on standards. It's based on principles, and those African principles are tried and true. They're basically universal, and so they work.
You made me think of Miss Louise Jones, my maternal grandmother. I can't tell you how many times I was taught, make sure you got some clean underwear on board just in case you get in a car accident, something happened to you on your way home. So thank you for making me think of her this evening. We're going to close it out now. Again, this has been a fantastic conversation. The hours flew by like I knew it would. There's so many more things that I wish we could touch on. I think we're going to have to do a part 2. I'm thinking about a month or so, we might need to bring it on back and touch on a few other topics. But as we close out, please share with us what is up, what's going on, what's next for you, whether it be personally, professionally, that you would like for our listening audience to know what's going on that we could support possibly. Again, what's next? We'll go in reverse order. So again, Dr. Luke, Dr. Rochester, and Miss Nadine, we'll let you get the closing word. Yeah, Dr. Luke.
All right. So, and I know in my introduction I didn't finish my part because I probably was rambling. You know, sometimes when you get a little older, you kind of got to get your speed up and get your rhythm going and all that, right? So now I got my rhythm in. No, but right now I'm working on. It was been mentioned a couple of times before that I am working on a doctorate in organizational leadership, dealing with how spirituality influences the educational success of Black men. Working on that, been working on it for a while. with Grand Canyon University. So that should be done within the next 6 months. Hope, working on it being totally completed. And then that parlays into some work, because not only spirituality, but looking at how we, I know sometimes that's taboo in American public education, but really it's about relationship and that connectedness. But with that, moving into making sure we talk about what's happening in our classrooms and how we're building up our teaching staff, our classified staffs on school campuses to have what they need to effectively work with our students and help them achieve at higher levels. And even though it's in my title, I don't really care for achievement too much. It's about learning. It's about student learning. The learning is the main thing. And then also there's, after that, this is the main thing in my life right now, getting that part done. But also I'll be writing a book that deals with the illusions in which we live in. People know me, know that I'm going to bring it from an African perspective, but I'm also going to bring it from a systems perspective too. So I study systems a lot, and looking at some of these things that aren't even real. The whole notion of we have racism, which is real, but race is not real. That's just a quick example. Race is not even real. It's a myth. It's a white supremacist myth that was created so that one group can be on top and all the others underneath. But we live in a system that's built on it, right? So making sure everybody understands the illusions in which we live and how we maneuver through them and how we can work to change them and break them up. I think it's a great time right now, all of the social justice initiatives that are going on right now, but we have to keep on moving and keep on pushing and making sure that everything is not lip service and it's not marching, but beyond the marching, now it's time to the action. So we have not made any changes until we see systems changing.
Powerful stuff, brother, powerful stuff. We pray that the Creator and the ancestors continue to guide your steps and have you make manifest those things that you have on your plate, brother.
Absolutely.
Dr. Rochester, what you got going on personally, professionally, what you want us and listening audience to know?
Okay, I'm gonna start with my school. So I have a goal for my school.
Remind us the name of your school one more time.
I will definitely do that. This is a special shout out to LaSalle Avenue Spanish Dual Language Elementary School. I see my AP is on here. She earlier had said, when we were talking about restorative justice, she was like, praise God, because it has made my job easier. So I do want to say for my school, I really have a desire to continue to move my school to another level. In 1 year, when I first got there, my school was literally in the midst of a lawsuit. It had like some of the lowest test scores in Los Angeles Unified School District. And in 1 year's time, with my team who came with me from my other school site, we literally transformed that school. In 1 year's time, we had the highest achievement growth rates than any other elementary school for, in regards to African-American children in all of Los Angeles Unified School District. And you know, LAUSD is a big place, right? We're number 2.
Second largest in the country.
And so I count myself blessed that I have the vision, and I have a team that jumps on board with my vision and we push it forward, and that we're making great gains for children. I mean, to know in 1 year's time, when this was a school that everybody had given up on, and what could happen for Black children, and then to have 100% increase for growth rates in both math and ELA is amazing. And so my goal with my school is to actually, I really want my school to be a blue ribbon school. I do want my school to be a California distinguished school. And I really want my school to get the recognition of what it deserves, which is the recognition for these babies, that our Black children have the ability to like literally smash these ideals that people have about them, and that they have the ability to be amazing not just for today, but in the future. So in addition to that, with my school, I have been kind of like pushed and pushed over the past couple of years. Several colleagues and family members and friends have told me, like, you need to write this stuff down. How do you do this? You know, and so I am writing a transformational leadership book that looks at transformational leadership from a social justice lens, because that is the added piece that we do with my school site, literally reconstructing curriculum and making sure that it has a social justice aspect to it. So I'm doing that, as well as venturing off with my motivational speaking gigs. And so I am doing that as well. And I have a desire to actually go back to the university level and go back to being a university professor. So I am working on that as well. I have taken off some time from that, but I'm feeling like it's time for me to go back. And that's pretty much it.
I love it. If anyone wanted to reach out to you for the motivational speaking, how do they get in contact with you for those reports?
Okay, I can type it. Well, actually, let me, look, I'm saying I could type it. No, I can't.
They can also do a form on the solution-based consulting website. They can complete a form on there.
Dr. Allen or Ms. Luke, that website.
It's consultingsb.org.
Excellent.
Yes.
And then the separate email that I never remember is Dr. Rock speaks at gmail.com. I never remember it, but now
Thank you so much.
yeah, and it's all lowercase. Dr. Rock speaks at gmail.com.
Is that ROCK?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
DRROC, not no K.
Oh,
Speaks.
Thank you.
Ms. Luke. Thank you.
And thank you.
Professionally, and how can we support?
Well, I have a lot of things on my plate and goals and dreams. As far as the school site is concerned, my goal is to empower our children to put their voice, to write their own books, and to become publishers at a young age. So I'm actually in the process of pulling that together so that I can work with a group of children to hopefully encourage them to become authors as well, to get their story told. I am continuing writing my children's stories, the veterinarian fashion designer, the gymnast, the musician, they call me Africa. I have another book that I'm writing. It's more for the primary grades, just empowering them with understanding who they are and the greatness that's in them, starting at the pre-primer ages. And I also have a class management book entitled, I Have to Teach That Too, which really focuses in on all of the different strategies that we've talked about over the years, including the restorative justice piece, and just how do you maneuver inside of a classroom so that you can really address the needs of your students all the way around. It's really focused on the being culturally relevant in education, and giving teachers some nuggets that they can actually pull out of the book and go into class the next day and implement some of those strategies. So that's another book that I'm finishing up. And of course, with our solution-based consulting business, the goal is for us to be worldwide, for us to go into schools all over the world and teach them how to reach our children, because our children are everywhere. African descendants are throughout the world. We are in the diaspora, so we need to be able to go everywhere. So my goals and dreams are huge, and I know we'll reach them, I know that I will be a #1 best-selling author. I know that everyone around the world will know the names of my books, and that I am Nadine A. Luke, the author, educator, entrepreneur, CFO, and all of that above. So those are something just happened.
The website.
The website for, I'm sorry, my screen had just went black. The website.
All the websites we want to support.
Yes, the website for my publishing company is njlukepublishing.com. And I got NJ because all of my friends said that I'm no joke. I may be quiet, but I get stuff done, and I will speak my mind in a very professional way. So NJ, njlukepublishing.com. And then for solution-based consulting, it's consulting SB, S as in Sam, B as in boy.org. And we're here, we're ready to go out into the field. We can do it virtually, right, partner? We can do virtual trainings. And once everything is lifted, we will be able to do on-site trainings. You can go to the website and complete a form to put a request in. And also with my books, if you are part of a district, you can go onto the website and request a quote and get invoices. I work through purchase orders and everything. So I am fully licensed in every area I need to be in order to serve you in getting what you need in these schools and libraries. So
Jamal, I also wanted to add that I'm also available to, I bring in the African perspective from a historical standpoint, as well as affirming Black students. So also I put in the chat just my email contact. You can reach me because those ladies are those ladies are solution-based consulting, and I'm for hire through them also.
Gotcha. That email being 1906 Khafre, KHAFRE @gmail. One more time, 1906 KHAFRE@gmail.com. Those websites again, njlukepublishing.com and consultingsb.org. Again, I am humbled and grateful.
And Dr. Rock Speaks @gmail.
Dr. Rock Speaks. Dr. DRROC Speaks @gmail. That's right. Thank you so much for that. Indeed. Again, I'm humbled. I'm honored to be in the presence of such mastery, of such knowledge, of such information. Thank you so very much, each and every one of you. We've got some comments in the chats, both on Facebook and here on Zoom. Again, basically saying this is informative and right on time. This is inspiring, seeing the great minds here together, collaborating.
Can we give it up one time for the Divine Nine?
I was wondering if we was going to mention that. Again, we have 3 members of Greek letter organizations representing well. Something must be going on in those long lines, those long lineages. Something is being transferred and passed down, and so we're grateful for that. Again, I see some sorors, some shout outs there in the chats as well. Again, we have Miss Sonia Salcedo from the Palmdale School District chiming in, saying great job to the Lukes as well. So again, we appreciate everyone who listens. We appreciate our esteemed panelists. Again, I am your host, Mr. Jamal Brown, AKA Mr. Black 365. You are listening to the Gist of Freedom radio show. This show will be archived at blackhistoryuniversity.com as well as on black365.com. And again, I wasn't just some Hollywood talk. I'm feeling that the audience feels that we need to come back and do this once again, perhaps in, 30, 45, 60, 90 days, what have you. But again, there's too much brain power on this Zoom for this discussion just to be contained in this 1 hour. So hopefully we can coordinate that again. But again, thank you so much, each and every one of you, and stay blessed. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Have a good evening.
Have a good evening.
Peace.